seated, please.
Ooh, all right. Hey, they had to give some. So, I was loving the energy, because when you travel around and talk at different churches, every church has a little bit different energy. I think y'all have seen this. You go somewhere and you're like, wow, that was Sleepyville. And then you go other places and you go, they're pretty energetic. Well, I could tell when I came last night that y'all were pretty energetic. Maybe even labeled a little bit different. Just because, people were excited to be together, and I love that. A few years ago, I was working out with a guy that he was probably about 6'3", 6'4". I'm almost 5'6". I like to tell people I'm 5.5.5. That makes it all just super clear. And so he was a tall workout guy, and the only reason to even work out is so you can go eat, right? That's the only reason to do it. I've since laid involved. But he was about 6'3", 6'4", and we would go to a place called Chappie's Deli almost every time after a workout. We'd get waffles and bacon, all the things that the Lord wants us to eat. And we're just digging in. And one day we're in there, we're in our little booth, and I'm kind of like a hyperactive. So when I'm talking, the more I talk about something, the more excited I get. My eyes get big, my hands are going crazy. And so I'm talking to Greg about what's going on in life. We start, just talking about things and workout and stuff. And I look over, and in the next booth right across the aisle is an elderly lady. Now, I'm not going to define what elderly is. I'm just going to say an elderly lady. And I looked over at her, and she just grinned. I was like, I don't know what that means, but that's, she might be hitting on me. And so I kind of turned a little bit and was talking to Greg and talking. I looked back at her, and she gave me one of these. Gave me a wink. I was like, whew. I mean, there are plenty attractive elderly ladies. I just wasn't interested, right? So I turned a little bit more. And I'm like, wow, this is getting crazy. And so when it was time to leave, Greg got up. And I'm so little, I got behind Greg so she couldn't see me. So I could just slip right out like a man with his child. So I just started moving out. And she said, young man, come here. I was, yes, ma'am. She said, I need to ask you a question. I said, yes, ma'am, I'm married. She said, no. I need to ask you a question. You belong to him, don't you? I said, yes, ma'am, I do. I do belong to him. She said, what church do you go to? I'm going to be a little insensitive now about our fellowship, okay? I want to warn you ahead of time. This is the kind of question that what church do you go to? You start thinking ahead of time about, now once I tell them where I go, where's their mind going to go? What questions are they going to start asking? So, she said, what church do you go to? I said, Landmark. See, super safe. Landmark. She said, what kind of church is that Landmark? I'm like, oh, man. I said, it's a Church of Christ. She literally inhaled so much air that it just drained the entire restaurant. She said, oh, I didn't know anybody in the Church of Christ had joy like that. I said, shh, it's just a few of us. Shh. Sometimes our behavior throws people off because we do things that they're not expecting. Our behavior does not match their expectation. So that especially when we're joyful as believers, sometimes people are like, really? A happy Christian? That sounds odd. Well, in John 13, Jesus has some behavior that doesn't match. He has some behavior that doesn't make sense to us. The first time I read this chapter, I remember it just kind of capturing my heart, and it's never really let it go. But it's not because of who was there or even what was done, but when it was done. So if you have your Bibles, let's turn to John chapter 13. John chapter 13. It says it was just before the Passover. Now remember, those of you who are for class, it was just before the Passover too, and Jesus goes and clears the temple at the Passover. So they're getting ready for the Passover again. Jesus knew that the time had come. Again in class, his time had not come yet, John chapter 2. But here in John 13, Jesus knows his time has come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, now he showed them the full extent of his love. This is the win. This is the win. He now showed them the full extent of his love. When? In the moment that he knew that all things were under his power. The evening meal was served. The devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power. What takes place in this chapter is not simply a lesson on just service, but service when? Service at what moment? Not service when it fits, not service when it's pleasant, not service when everything lines up. But in this time, Jesus serves when he knows the Father has placed all things under his feet. This is the moment of his ministry that Jesus is actually the most powerful. This is the moment that he has the most authority. This is the moment in which his title is the biggest. And it's in that moment that he decides to serve. It's not in the moment that he becomes the greatest that he decides that he's going to start rattling off the commands and telling them what to do. It's in the moment that he's the greatest and all things are under his power that he decides to become powerless. It's weird. I'm going to read a little something for you. So what captured me was not that Jesus washed feet, although the leader performing the lowest job is amazing. What captured me is not who he washed, although making sure the feet of the betrayer could run clean to his coins is outrageous. What captured me is when he washed. Jesus knew the Father put all things under his power. All things under his power. Jesus had full knowledge of his divinity. He knows that he has power to call the forces of heaven for deliverance and vengeance. He knows that death is the 98-pound weakling. He knows that nails can pierce his hands and a spear his side only with permission. In the moment he knows that he is the most, he takes the action of the least. Jesus rises, he takes off his outer clothes, he wraps a towel around his waist, he kneels, he washes, he dries, he kneels, he washes, he dries, he kneels, he washes, he dries. The most powerful becomes the most powerless. Powerless to his betrayer, powerless to the one who would deny him and then make the keynote on the opening day of the church, powerless to the sons of thunder, powerless to the one who would cheat people on their taxes, powerless to the zealot, powerless to him who would later wonder, powerless to me, powerless to you, powerless, so that we would know that true power comes in the form of a servant, not a scepter, a towel, not a title, a basin, and not a bank account. So that Jesus lowers himself and he becomes powerless in the moment that he's the most powerful. This is insane. Because most of us, we like to be a little powerful. We like for people to do what we say. Especially if we're in a position of authority. We want people to know that we are in control. I've been labeled, I don't know why, I've been labeled a control freak. So my friends are like, Paul, you're a control freak. I'm like, I am not. They'll go, well, if you don't get your way, you'll get upset. I said, listen, that's because my way is right. Right? You know, isn't that the way we kind of think? My way is correct. So I'm a control freak. Most of us in our lives, we're kind of control freaks. If we're going to be honest, this participation time, if we're going to be honest, how many of you kind of like get your way? Look at that. How many of you despise, you hate getting your way? You're upset every time you get your way. All right, good. Because some of y'all didn't raise your hand on the former one, so I knew I'd get you with that one. You know, we like to have our way. And so Jesus in this moment shows us how not to have our way, even if we deserve it. Even if we have a right to our way. Even if we are right in the moment. How do we realize that being the servant and not having a scepter counts? That the towel reigns over the title? That the basin is elevated over the bank account? This is a tough lesson for most of us because we do love being right. Now, that's not to say that we need to go out and be wrong, but we love being right. And so Jesus could have so easily got up from the table and say, guys, listen. Y'all seen me raise the dead. You've seen me heal the blind. You have seen the lame man get up and dance. Who in the room, real quick, who in the room is most powerful? You'd be like, you, Jesus. That's right. Now, once we got here, everybody here knows that when we enter a room, the first thing you do is you wash feet. Not one of you did it. I've got to tell you that in this moment, I'm so disappointed. You've been with me for 3 years. 3 years. You were there when I made the water to wine in Cana. You were there when I cleared out the temple. You were there when I was at Simon's house and had to humiliate him in front of Mary. You were there when I yelled out Lazarus' name and he came out of the tomb. Don't you know me by now? Why in the world, after 3 years, do you not get it? That's what most of us would do because we love the lecture. We love to give out the lecture of correction. Jesus doesn't lecture to correct. He simply performs the action. He simply takes on the role. Wrapped in a towel around his waist, and after that he poured water into a basin, and he began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Okay, so he came to Simon Peter. Most likely this was early in the process. Because if Jesus went to his right, it would have meant that he began with who? Who was like, yeah, John's right there on him. And you got to love John because John never actually says this out loud, like he never says it's me, John. But John likes to write, the disciple that Jesus, man, is that not like the coolest? How would you like to be the disciple Jesus loved? I mean, out of the 12, you're writing one of the Gospels, and everybody else gets the label of like tax collector and zealot or doubter and sons of thunder. Now, I've got to admit, that rock's pretty good. Sons of thunder is pretty strong. But you're the one that Jesus loved, which is so interesting because at the supper, John is leaning against Jesus' chest. But yet in Revelation chapter 1, quick sidebar, Revelation chapter 1, the best friend of Jesus, the one that Jesus loved, hears Jesus' voice, turns around and sees him, and doesn't fall against his chest, but falls at his feet as though dead when he actually sees Jesus for who he is. Revelation 1 is John's vision being opened up to fully see Jesus, and he falls at his feet though dead. But John, the one that Jesus loved, is not washing anybody's feet. He didn't go, time out, Lord, time out, time out, time out. I'm the one you love. Let me take over for you. Most likely, Jesus started with John. And then maybe next, it was Peter. Peter was in the top 3, remember? Peter, James, and John. So most likely it was Peter. Peter raised his voice. He's like, no, Lord, no, you will not. You will never. That's pretty strong, right? I mean, you've seen Jesus raise the dead, and you've seen him heal the blind, and you know how powerful he is, and you're going to go, nope, you're not doing that. How strong do you have to be to tell God no? Right? I told my mama no one time. She said, take out the garbage. I said, I'll get to it. She said, you're going to take it out now. I said, if you want it taken out now, take it out yourself. I'm barely alive today. I was supposed to be 6'7", but Mama got loose. I don't even I don't get away with telling my mama no. Peter's like, no, Lord, you will never. And Jesus didn't go, no, Peter, you always run in your mouth. He says, if I don't wash your feet, you have no part of me. Typical Peter. He is an extremist. Peter's like, you will never wash my feet. If I don't wash your feet, you have no part of me. Well, not only my feet, my head and my hands as well. Give me a bath, Lord. I'm all in. Just that quick, Peter shifts. But you got Jesus, who with his message is, if I don't wash you, you have no part of me. If you're keeping notes, point number 1 is message. If I don't wash you, you have no part of me. The message that Jesus is showing right here is that he's saying, John, I love you. I love you. You are the disciple that I love. I'm going to wash your feet. Peter, you are rambunctious and you're just off the chart and you needed to be medicated. I'm going to wash your feet. Judas, I know that you're counting your coins in your head right now, and you can't wait to betray me, and I'm going to make sure your feet are clean as you run to turn me in. It's bizarre. Because, see, we keep a list. Most of us keep a list of wrongs, and we keep a list of hurts, and we remember what somebody said last week, last year, last decade. Some of us remember stuff said last century. I mean, back in the 1900s. You've got a list. Somebody mentions that person's name and you're like, let me tell you what they said to me. What if Jesus had done that? What if he had kept the list? What if he had been washing everybody's feet and he got to Judas and he goes, no. But he doesn't. Why? Because the truth is, if we're really honest, most of us feel a lot more like Judas than we do John. Most of us don't feel like, I am the disciple that Jesus loves. Most of us don't go to work or hang out with our family and they go, why are you smiling so big? Hey, I was at that church today and I looked around and I think I was God's favorite. I think I was God's favorite. We don't do that, right? But John was able to do that. Whereas we tend to come into the body and look around and we say, well, I'm glad they don't know what I'm going through. And I'm glad that he doesn't know my sin. And I'm glad that she doesn't know my sin. And wow, they seem to have it all together. Look at that family over there. They got it all together. Meanwhile, that family that has it all together is like, y'all keep it together. Y'all keep it, because they had the fight on the way in, and it was like rambunctious. And if somebody had filmed that and put it on the Facebook, DHR would be rolling in about now. But we look at people and we think everybody else is God's favorite except for us. So Jesus, his message is, unless you're clean, you have no part of me. But understand that I'm willing to clean everybody, regardless. I'm willing to wash you clean even while you're counting the coins in your head to betray me. I'm willing to wash you clean as you're thinking about something you're going to do at work this week that you don't need to. I'm going to wash you clean as you're thinking about the hatred you have in your heart for somebody in your life. I'm going to wash you clean in the middle of your uncleanness. I don't wait for you to reach a certain level before you get there. One of the best passages, if you can have best passages, to me at least, is Romans 5:8. It says, while we were still sinners, Christ died for the ungodly. This passage is not, once you quit sinning, Christ died for the ungodly, right? It says, while you were still sinning, while you were in, while you were in the very act. So like that darkest moment that you have, that sin that plays in your mind, that time capsule that you keep going back to and saying, I wish I'd not done that, I wish I'd not done that, I wish I'd not done that. And that's the time in which you feel like this disqualifies me from being accepted by God. Jesus says that dark moment, that shameful sin, that thing that you never want brought up again, it's that moment. It's that moment I died for. Not your good moments. Not your moments where you get to sing Our God He is Alive at the top of your lungs and feel like, wow, this is truly the anthem. But that moment that you hide, that moment that keeps you awake at night, that moment that you hope is never discovered, he says, that's the moment. That's the moment that I washed you. That's the moment that I cleansed you. That's the moment that I redeemed you. And so he says to Peter, listen, if I don't wash you, you don't have any part of me. So he gave a message. But he goes on from there and he gives the model. He says a person who has had a bath only needs to wash his feet. His whole body is clean, and yet you are clean, though not every one of you, for he knew who was going to betray him. And that's why he said not everyone is clean. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes, he returned to his place, and he says, do you understand what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that's what I am. Now that I, your Lord and your teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I've set for you an example that you should do as I've done for you. I tell you the truth, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you'll be blessed if you do them. So he gave us the message, hey, when you're the most unclean, I'm here to wash you and clean you. Then he gave us a model. He says, not only am I going to wash you, you need to be out there washing others. You need to be out there forgiving others. You need to be out there releasing others. Because you've been sinned against and you've been wronged. You've not only wronged others, people have wronged you. And chances are, if you're washing feet and you go around the table, there's going to be some folks who are left out. And Jesus models, no one is left out. Even the ones that were most against me, I did not leave them out. The ones most against you, you did not leave them out. And that doesn't mean that there aren't heartaches. And it doesn't mean that it isn't painful. And it doesn't mean that the other person wasn't wrong. Forgiveness does not mean, hey, I'm forgiving you, and I want you to know what you did wasn't wrong. No, forgiveness is, it was wrong, but I'm not going to hold it against you. We've all got that in our lives, that thing that was wrong. So my biological father left before I was even born, so I didn't have a relationship with him. But my sister was 6 years old, so she did. So her whole life, she's really struggled. Why was I not good enough? Why did Dad leave? Well, as he got older and he got sick, he ended up dying of cancer, and then ultimately combined with heart failure just a few years ago. I remember him calling me up and he said, son, I need you to forgive me. And I said, well, why? I don't feel like, I didn't actually know you. I don't know what to forgive you of. And so he went down through the litany, through the list of his sins that he had committed against our family, right? And then I knew I had a lot to forgive him of. My mama wasn't one that was like a reliver. She wasn't like, okay, gather the family around. I want to tell you about the evils of your dad. My mom never did that, so I didn't know. He told me his own evils. And I said, yeah, I'll forgive. But it was hard to erase those memories, right? Was I done wrong? I don't really know. I was so little, but my sister was. My mom was. It's easy to keep that list. Was he wrong? Yes, he was. Is he forgiven? Yes, he is and was. And so Jesus' message is, unless you're clean, you don't have any part of me. But he also says the model is, I want you to take what I've given you, and I want you to give that to other people in your life. It's sometimes easy to give to strangers, right? We're talking to a stranger, and they're like, I don't know Jesus, and we're on fire. Hey, I want to tell you about Jesus. But we got somebody close to us that did us wrong, that needs Jesus. We're kind of like, I hope they find him. We got to leave them on their own, right? And Jesus is like, no, the ones closest to us often need him the most. So he washes everybody's feet. He gives the message. He gives the model. And ultimately, all of this, the third point, is that the greatest lesson is that he gives mercy. He gives mercy. He gives mercy when he was the most powerful, when he had the most authority. He didn't give mercy to gain authority. It wasn't like the Father was like, if you'll prove yourself merciful, and then I'm going to grant you a greater level of power. The Father gave him all the power, and he gave out mercy. It's so amazing that he did that. We are actually, and not everybody's going to accept it when we go to them, but we're actually in a lot of power and a lot of control of other people's lives. And we're holding it against them, right? And we need to be like Christ and claim the power, but release it through being a servant, and release it through the towel, and release it through the basin. To say, you know what, we've had some issues and we've had some problems. So as we close today, just a couple of things. Number one, if you're not cleansed, if you are sitting in a sin or a memory's trapped you in the past and you don't feel like you're good enough, God doesn't love you, somehow you're outside of the system and can't get in, Jesus was the most powerful, and he washed everybody's feet. He wants you to be cleansed, absolutely. And there's not a test to take, and there's not a level to meet. And when you come up, Randall's not going to go, hey, we got a quick 39-point quiz, and we're going to find out if this forgiveness is going to take or not. It's not. It's as simple as saying, I want it. I want to be cleansed. I want to be right. But done. How powerful is Jesus? To cleanse automatically. Then on the opposite side of that, there may be some people in your life that you need to cleanse. That you need to go to today and say, you know what, I want you to know that for a week or a year or a decade or longer, I've had this intense hatred or intense pain or intense issue with you, and I haven't been able to let it go. And whether or not you accept it, and whether or not we can heal this relationship, and whether or not we're ever friends or family again, I just want to come to you and say, I'm dropping it. I'm laying it down. And I'm forgetting it, and I'm forgiving, and we're moving on, even if you don't want to, right? Because that's what Jesus did. That was his life, and that was his legacy. He says, if you do these things, you will be blessed. You'll be blessed. And we live in a culture right now, like the number one teaching out there is how to be blessed. Don't you want to be blessed by God? Like just sitting there and the blessings are going to come out? He tells us how we bless. We are blessed when we serve and when we forgive and when we model and when we take his message and when we give mercy to other people. So if you need to be cleansed today, or if you just want to come forward and say, you know what, I've got some folks that I've got to let off the hook because I'm harboring in my heart, and I need some prayers to be able to have enough boldness to go and forgive them. Whatever your need is today, why don't you come while we stand and sing together.